Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this day. We have a very, very special guest. It's an old friend of mine. She's not that old, but an old friend of mine from Montreal from back in the 70s. And she's an amazing artist, Mona Rutenberg. Thank you for joining us this day, Mona.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Share with us very briefly your work, just a little bit about your work, and because I'm excited about it. Every time I see a new piece by you, or even when I go to your website, I just love perusing. Share a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy my work. That makes me feel like I want to talk about it more. So, well, I come from a family where there's a lot of talented souls, and I think I had my hands busy even in my young years, in that I was given art materials, so painting, drawing materials, textiles, leather. Moving through years of some summer camp where I love to hang out in the arts and crafts. So you get a really nice introduction to all kinds of media. And I do recall at one point in one of the summer camps finding bits and pieces of soapstone and discovering that carving was very natural for me, and making three-dimensional objects was very natural for me. By the time I was in college, or in Quebec, we call it Cégep, I was registered for creative arts program, a program where there were drawing classes and painting classes. There wasn't too much in sculpture, but by the time I finished that, knowing that I would study art education to go into art therapy, I took more courses in art and always gravitated to the sculpture program. But where things really pushed forward was having made a figurative piece that came to me in a dream. And by putting it together in clay, by making the sculpture in clay, I bumped into a problem where I needed to make a mold, and was introduced to a teacher that I had been unfamiliar with, not in a school, but in a private program, where he made molds and also had models posing. So in clay with long poses, I was able to do figurative work. And an evolution, ultimately, without, this long story made very short, I really always wanted to weld, but that's not something that was easily accessible in university. And by the time I was 50, that's when I got my first flavor of welding, my
Wow.
introduction.
Wow. And although I'm partial to all your pieces, whether it's three-dimensional or two-dimensional, there's something intrinsically exciting about your welding work, your pieces that involve gears and this and that. We'll get into those in a couple of minutes. You sent me, and this is also for the people listening to this as a podcast. We're a webcast, so thank goodness we have the visuals, and we're going to show in a few minutes your pieces. But because it's a podcast as well, we're going to get a little bit descriptive. And you've given me a list, 4 categories: rooted in sound, metal parts, figurative work, human figures, and the fourth one, clay figures and drawings evolving into steel silhouettes, which I really love as well. And we've got about 5 pictures we're going to run through. And I think it's fascinating, but that's just me. I'm also an artist. I think when we met, I was doing political cartoons for a couple of papers in Montreal, and some animation and all that sort of thing. So your 5 pictures that we've got, which we'll put up one at a time, it looks like a wide shot of a piano. Can you briefly speak to that? Because then we're going to do the tight shot of the piano with the hand.
Well, on a technical level first, rooted in sound is a 30-inch by 30-inch thin sheet of steel. That's the background. And in front of it, mounted on it, is a section of the keyboard from a piano that was rotting and ready to be thrown out. And on top of that I had done 2 hand castings of a 10-year-old girl, and the hands, as you can see, are covered with small little collage pieces of aged music sheet note paper. Intertwined are these vines that are also rods of steel that I've manually bent, and the floral elements that have been added, both with little pieces of metal, but even, as you will show at some point, that some of the floral elements are actually the hammers that were from the soft padded oval pieces that hit the string for music. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
So that's a technical description, first of all.
Mm-hmm. So
Everything,
yeah.
the background, just to say, has been a patina has gone on it, which I pushed deliberately using vinegar, which kind of changes the finish of a metal, but some of the metal is rusted and mixed with acrylic paint. So this is the technical side of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So exciting. 2 other pictures under this category of rooted in sound. It looks like metal and wire. And there's the 4th picture. It's a spring, which I don't know what fascinates me about springs, but can we talk briefly a little bit about those 2 photos, metal and wire one and the spring?
The spring element that's on the piano,
Exactly.
on the piano part. Right.
Yeah.
I think my sense of humor pops up in my sculptures because of that, the bends and the movement, but also that little boing. And music is, clearly lyrical in sound, depending how you play. But I don't know. I think I just put the spring in as a goofy element, and I don't create that. That's a found object, and I think what's important in a big piece like this is not to have a look of sameness. That there's an ebb and flow, a push and pull. There's things underneath. There's things on top. The hands are caught underneath or covered, if you will, like by these floral elements, maybe almost like appearing like it's underground or under the leaves, in the woods, under the leaves, perhaps, where, what are these hands doing on this keyboard? Where is this from? And yeah, so the spring is kind of like, well, what is that doing there? Like, and what if the spring, clearly as vines do grow and they do these loopy things, time has passed and elements pop up, because that's what nature does. Things mushroom and develop. So that's
Absolutely.
a
Absolutely.
natural aspect to making a piece look not slick and tight.
Yeah.
It's got to be loose and rugged and from beneath. Yeah.
Yeah. Not contrived in essence, perhaps. The second category is metal parts, and there are 7 pictures here. And what grabbed me right away, not simply because it was the first one, was one that has what appears to be scissors in the upper left-hand corner and a wrench in the lower left. And you probably know what I'm referring to. What's the story about that?
Well, first of all, I think tools have beautiful shapes. Like each one, somebody designed it. I mean, like a car, somebody designed it. They didn't just draw it. They had to build it in 3D. So this one element, I think, can be interesting on its own. What happens, of course, over time, if people discard them, it gets thrown in the basement, it got wet, it rusts, it breaks, people were rough with it. Um, I like old tools because, well, new ones can be pretty as well, but they have stories. They've been used many times, maybe by many people. I don't know. Um, I'm definitely attracted to these things because my father was a person who fixed things, made things, built things. And we had a home, a summer home that we used on weekends and part of the summer. Well, the dock down by the water needed some repairs, or the canoe needed some fixing, or you had to uh, always repair something. And so what do you repair? Anything that breaks or needs, improvement, you need a box of tools. So they were always just lying around, the same like cutlery would be in a kitchen. They're your utensils, but of purpose. Um, and I think so what happens is I find these objects. I mean, I come across them in farm sales or garage sales. I like to, people, tell me, I don't need this. My grandparents died and there's a bunch of tools in the basement. Do you want them? I'm like, yes. And I don't care, how damaged they are. In fact, they're more interesting if they are. That piece with all the parts put together is almost like a collage of the relationship between the parts and how, they're not shears are not being used as shears. They're being kind of honored for their shape, and yet they're relating to other parts as well, which can make a story.
Absolutely. So exciting. Is it fair to say the same thing goes for another piece? Um, it looks like there's tweezers in the center and a chisel in the lower left. Again, tools. Exciting, tactile. I love tactile. And any comments about that?
So at this recording, yeah, I don't have the piece in front of me, but it's another section of the
Yeah.
same part, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. It's scrumptious to me. That's the only way I can describe it because of its
Yeah.
tactileness. And to me, it's multifaceted even within the one section. There's so much, it's like a story in a way. And then when you kind of go wide on the shot, even more is revealed. It's really, really cool. And again, there's always movements, even though they're stationary objects right now. It's almost like they're frozen in time. You could almost see them moving in another lifetime or in another presentation. I love that.
And it's really nice, though, if I may say, that when people look at pieces like this, many will immediately connect by saying, oh, I used to use that when I used to do such and such in our house, or my grandfather had one of those, or wow, they don't make them like that anymore, or the red color that's left. Oh, yeah, now they're not red, they're, covered in black or something. Or, yeah, what I wanted to say also, what I like about this grid like Mondrian like arrangement of tools is that in Montreal back in the 70s and 80s, there was a store called Pascal's.
Oh, sure. I remember
It
it.
was a very big Canadian tire, like hardware store, right? Yeah, you remember
Yes,
it?
absolutely. It was actually in my neighborhood in Côte des Neiges, and one of my guitars came from there. It came from Pascal, and so I've got this emotional attachment to the store.
And I don't know if you remember, but immediately when you walked through the first doors of that big store, in front of you, bigger than a doorway, was this arrangement of tools. They were painted black, I believe, but this is where my piece is reminiscent of that sculpture. Now, I don't know if they used it for like protection of, because it could be used almost like as a security gate, but you had to walk by it. And many people who are from Montreal who've seen my piece, they'll say, did you know about that sculpture in Pascal's? And I'm like, exactly. Now that store closed, I don't know, in the mid 80s or something, gone. But that sculpture remains in my mind. And this, by the way, the piece that you're looking at can be hung because it's got a red bar across the top. It's a chisel.
Yes.
That can be hung in numerous ways in a window frame. So what I imagine, or it could be in the middle of a room as a partition, but you want to see it from both sides because both the front and the back are interesting. So normally sculpture is in the round and there's, the 360 degrees. This one, it's not perfectly flat, but it needs to be seen. There's two halves to it. Because sometimes one tool may look even better on the other side, or the name is engraved in it. It tells you what company it came from. So I hope to make more of those. That's kind of a direction where, I'll push further. And if anybody has any tools they want to give me, they always need
Very
your
cool.
tools to help
Very
me.
cool. Here's something under the same category, another photo that you sent me. It almost looks two-tiered and it's almost surreal. And I refer to it as reality or not. And or the first thing that came to mind for me was yin yang, but instead of it being horizontal, it was vertical. I don't know if you know which one I'm referring to. If not, that's cool. We've got tons of other ones we can chat about. But for example, I saw two pieces like this. It looks like a person standing and they've got a shovel for a head. I love that. Um, uh, what's the story behind that?
That shovel is a darling little toy shovel that a friend who had a home in the same region of where our country house was, he played with that as a child. And when I happened to be visiting and we were talking about my art, he said, I have something that you might want, and I don't need it. I don't use it. And it's old, and it's a charming little piece. So he gave it to me. And I find what happens is something like that little shovel, it looks figurative. As you said, there's like this head form, but also where the handle is on the lower part, I'm like, it's a cavity, it's an opening. So it's very deliberately placed. That female little figure was just, a fun compilation of parts. I, sometimes one piece needs to take center stage. And I think in this one, that was the inspiration. Like sometimes just, one piece just needs a few little more parts to kind of push it beyond what it was. And now, here's where my figurative influence and the body and the human figure comes back into play, but in a metallic way, a whimsical way. I like that one. It's fun. I mean, it's small. I know I didn't give you measurements, but it's just about 14 inches high.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is, again, when you turn it around, it's got the because shovels you scoop, especially if you're playing with one on the beach, you want to be able to dig into the wet sand. So it's got great form on both sides. Yeah.
Love it. I love it.
Mhm.
There's also another, what appears to be a figure, another person perhaps, and there's two vices. I don't know if that's recognizable by other people, and I have it theoretically up on the screen right now. It's got vices for arms and maybe a gear head. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What is so cool? Tell me.
I don't know what part that head is, but what I love is that when I found it, it was bent. And when something has some wonky feature to it, I keep that. Like that's how I found it. So therefore, it's telling me that's how it needs to stay. I kind of believe that some of the parts that I find, they don't have voices. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they resonate with me. They sometimes I'll look at something and I immediately think, oh my, I have to use that in a particular way because I can see it. before I use it. In most cases, I have no idea what a piece will be. But anyways, yes, they are vices. You still find those vices in the store, from these little, 2, 3 inch ones to quite large. Those are great arm forms. And yeah, that piece, what I really like about the piece is the legs and the feet are, if flipped upside down, those come from a cobbler or shoemaker who,
Ah,
would be using the forms to be able to repair shoes on. So that matching set, which another sculpture later that you show, the feet become feet, but they become the feet of a figure, has nothing to do with shoe repair anymore.
very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So we're coming to the next category, figurative work and human figure. And when we kind of reconnected some years ago, because we go back to the 70s and there was this gap where, we were busy with life and things took us everywhere. When we reconnected, I saw your female pieces. Many of them are female and pregnant and beautiful Mother Earth kind of pieces. This one in particular almost moves me. She's got her arms crossed and she's gazing down. I don't know if you
Mm.
know.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And there's another one, a torso just of a female torso. And then there's the pregnant female. There's those three. So did you want to share any stories or anything around those?
Well, um, so there were actually models posing for those, and there were a half a dozen of us in a class on working on stands that we would rotate every 15, 20 minutes. So you worked in the round, the models sat in the middle of the room. But what would happen for me each time that I would work on those sculptures is usually the models pose. I mean, generally it was interesting, but I would get bored with it. So the woman that is sitting, and she's made with a material called plaster and hydrostone. Her legs were in that position, her arms were in that position, but her head was straight up.
Ah,
And I just thought, well, what emotion would push the sculpture to be more intense? I want angst, or I guess an injection of drama in the
mhm.
piece, whether it's funny or serious. The thing that's happened that's interesting is that white piece was sitting outside in my garden for many years because I didn't have enough place in the home where I was living to put it. And she sat outside amongst the flowers. And I decided to leave it outdoors all 4 seasons, which, of course, in Montreal, there's lots of snow. And
Yep.
over time, no, that's not true. I would bring it in the winter time because, yeah, the piece I thought would fall apart, which it did weaken, but all the little embedded little dips and in her back and around the body, it's changed color, and it kind of it aged. It was outside for 20 years. It aged and it
Wow.
got worn down, and the water, every time it rained, I guess it was, a little splash became a bigger little indentation, and then it got bigger and it got bigger. I look at it now, it's indoors now. It looks like it was in the ocean floor. It looks like it's from hundreds of years ago. Some of my pieces, you don't have a lot of pictures of this, but they look like whalebone. And I really like the natural deterioration. Well, like us, not that I want to say we're deteriorating, but our bodies are changing and there's lines, and the element of time has worked our beings, the shells, our casing. Well, that's what's happened to the sculpture. And it's the natural elements that did it. It wasn't like my touching it that made a finish on the bronze patina that made it age.
Yes,
It's the natural elements. That's very cool. So,
it is cool.
you
Oh,
know, and yeah, but she worked hard, that girl. She sat there. I know it looks very sorrowful, and sometimes there's personal stories that go behind the pieces, which don't necessarily, that was not the initial motivation for what she appears to look like, but it really, there's a lot of self-reflection going on in that one. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I think one can feel that on some level or another. It's very
Mm.
cool. Now we're going to switch to the last category. Clay figures and drawings evolve into steel silhouettes. And two of the pieces here, I have to say, and I'm sure you'll know which ones I'm referring to, they remind me, and people of age will remember Alfred Hitchcock, that old series, and his logo, which were a couple of simple lines outlining his face or profile of his
Yes.
face.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, two of these pieces remind me of that. And I was jealous when I first saw the logos. I was very young, and every time they rerun those shows, it's like, I wish I had the guts to simplify like
Mm.
that into a few
Mm.
simple lines. And one of them, to me, it looks like a mother holding a baby. It's so simple, but that's what I got right away of it. We'll show that now. And another one looks like a torso or a pregnant figure as well. And both of those have come up. And again, how do you do that?
How do I technically make the piece, or how do I come up with the linear element?
The linear element, because it's so, to me, it's graphic and it's there it is. It's almost like an illusion. A lot of magicians, we like to believe that we complete something, like you didn't actually see what's in my hand and you believed I put it into this hand and now it's gone. So a whole thing was
Right.
created with minimalism, if you will. And so I believe the same is evident with these two pieces, because there's minimal lines, and yet to me the pictures are complete.
Yeah, and you're explaining my answer better than me.
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
Thank you. No, it's good. Occasionally I will draw before I make something, and especially, when you're studying art classes and fine art classes in school, you're invited to always draw, because drawing keeps your mind sharp and your eye sharp, which is basically what all the art is about. It's the visual perception. That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
The visual perception. That, do you have to draw the whole figure to make the figure look like a person? No. You can do well, I think what happens is sometimes I'll do almost like a storyboard and draw the figure. And then, not because I get tired of drawing the whole thing, but I'm like, I can say as much about that drawing and now I can do it less. So let me remove some of the lines. Let me say the same thing with less. And you remove and you remove and you remove. And now you get down to this quick sweep. Like you said, the Alfred Hitchcock quick sweep of a line that you know who you're looking at, because it's not necessary to have a paragraph. You only needed 3 words to say the same thing. And I'm not somebody who says little, but it is beautiful to have something that represents a form, whether it's a pregnant woman or what you think looks like a child. It's suggested. You can, this is the mind can play a game with you, going, well, that could be something else. And does it matter? And let me just say, by the way, that those pieces sometimes, they're not necessarily all on stands. They can be hung on the wall, but there's little bars behind that are about 3 inches deep. That means the piece can be screwed into the wall with the little, with like an L bracket. Now the sculpture is away from the wall. It's not flush against the wall. If you shine a light on the sculpture, now you get a shadow. You get a
Oh,
drawing from the
yeah.
sculpture.
So cool.
That is very cool. If you project 2 lights on them at 2 different angles, and if you put the pieces near a corner, you can get 2 drawings in the corners plus the sculpture, that's like, oh crap, now it's a 2D and a 3D piece.
Oh,
That's lighting is very important with sculpture, because you can play with its depth, and you've added more character to what looked like initially just a simple, you know, form,
yes.
shape. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. We're going to skip through to when I saw this, and you're going to think I'm off the wall. And maybe I am. Maybe I should hang myself back up on the wall as a
Me
sculpture. I don't
too.
know.
We
But
are off the wall. That's why we're friends,
I
Mike.
hope so. I hope so. So this reminded me, I believe it's called a Rorschach test or Rorschach test. It looked like a butterfly opening its wings. It was a sketch, I think, and then it became a 3D piece. But then when it became a 3D piece, it reminded me of ribs, a rib cage, maybe. So what's going on with that?
Hmm. Um, I definitely like bones and the inners of the human figure. Um, the the drawing was, and I remember doing a series of sketches where uh, just I was drawing the roundness of the rib cage, but and I really liked what the drawings looked like, but I thought it's not satisfying enough to me. I need to do this in metal. I was working with wire that's almost just as thick as a hanger, which is really nice because you can easily bend it and shape it. Um, put the drawing aside, put this long rod in the middle, which, ultimately, if you want to push the whole sculpture into the ground outdoors, it can stay outside. You push the rod down into the earth. And then, yeah, I just played with bending this hanger, echoing that, you're right, rib-like form. I can't tell you why I did it, but I definitely enjoyed the um, rawness of the human body again, but ignoring skin and detail and muscles and yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's
It's all good. It's all good. It all makes sense
they're
on
skeletal. I think
yes,
that well,
skeletal. Yeah.
it's or skeletal, yeah. Actually, and just without going down that big heavy psychological path, it was at a point where I was definitely in a dark place emotionally. And when you do something so simple and raw, and you feel that way, it echoes in your art. And I think
Absolutely.
when I look at those pieces, which have never been on display or anything, I just know, ooh, I was going for the really basic brass tacks elementary side of things, if that explains that.
It sure does. Now, one of my favorite pictures, it's kind of a generic picture. It's a picture of you, and you're in a junkyard or a scrapyard with a couple of vehicles, junked vehicles, which in them, which to me is art as well. Like
They
they look,
are.
they're scrumptious again, and there you are, kind of in the middle of it, kind of sitting there, and they'll see that in a few seconds. And what I love about it is a duality. But do you have any comments about that?
Um, well, first of all, I was in Jerome, the town of Jerome, which is in Arizona, not far, well, sort of, maybe another hour and a half away from the Grand Canyon. And I went to visit this place, which was like, they called it a ghost town. So there was metal all over the place. And those old trucks, I love them. I was like, can I drive one of those? So I was just so drawn to have to stand there. And I ended up purchasing, can you imagine going on the airplane with that like saw blade, which of course I could find in Montreal, but I just needed my souvenir from there. Um, I love those old cars. They're classics. And there they are, just rusting, doing their thing, time, ripping them apart slowly. But yeah, I was thrilled. I just felt so at home.
Absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
Teslas for me.
Yes, I just love that. And I love the contrast between human and machine and all that. And yet there's
You're
a
right.
humanity. Some people might think I'm mad by saying this, but you'll get it, of course. There's a humanity about the trucks, about the vehicles, about the inanimate objects there. The Japanese believe that everything has a soul as well. And so I kind of do, but not in a new agey kind of way, but more in a humanistic kind of way. So it looks like we're coming to the end, and I want everyone to check out your website. I want everyone to check out, because we only covered a small amount of your pieces of your work. How can people reach you?
Well, they can go to my website, which is my full name, Mona Rutenberg, one word, .ca. And feel free to ask me questions. And, I think you can also look me up on Facebook under Mona Rutenberg, sculptor. Um, yeah, if I can just add a quickie comment too, which is I like the conversation that we had when we had a preamble before this podcast, and you talked about the guts of something. Uh, for whatever we were referring to in general, or specifically, I can't remember, but I do want to say that whether it's the interior of something, whether it's a historical reflection of things that once was, I think um, you do all this work with illusion and imagination. I'm also interested in take a look at what you see, but realize there's a lot more going on because this is a timepiece. These things have um, had their purpose and they were discarded, considered not useful anymore, garbage. But no, they shouldn't be forgotten. They have functions. So bring them back out and, recycle, yes, but bring them back out so that what was can still be, but transform it. That's my, illusion of what I'm trying to create, I think, to bring it back to life and make it joyful, positive, fun.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I
Mhm.
want to thank you once again, Mona. It's Mona Rutenberg, artist, for joining us this day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
A-
Fabulous.
And thanks to all of you out there who joined us. And welcome everybody to Magical People. We have my very, very special guest this week, Paul Abbey. How are you this week, Paul?
I'm very good, Dr. Michael, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. It's a great honor.
It is an honor to have you on my show, Paul. You are an amazing person with an amazing background. You are a raconteur, an actor, magician, Tai Chi instructor, restorer, antique furniture restorer, that is. And amongst all the things you do, I want to tackle a little bit so people can understand and relate. Your background as far as what has made you. I know that there's a lot of things that bring us to the point we're at in this life, but the performance artist, if you will, because I looked at a clip which we're going to share in a few minutes of you performing, and I would not have recognized you. And I know that's what you were aiming for. You were a character. And I think that's so crucial. I think the art of magic is worthy of not just showing a trick, bing, bang, and it's done, it's gone, or even what some people do on social media where it's just, something appears and disappears and that's the whole thing. But you're more than that. And I suspect it's because of your theatrical background. Can you share with us a little bit where you're coming from, where your theatrical background is from, what it comprises, etc.?
Absolutely. It's a strange thing, actually, because I come from quite a military family. Nearly all of my family have been in the military in some respect, and my father was an RSM, Regimental Sergeant Major. So I kind of grew up in a very overly disciplined environment as I grew up as a child. And I did go along to the TA, which is a territorial army at one point, but it didn't really appeal to me. I was always keen with magic from a very, very early age. And I remember seeing TV, a very, very young boy, watching David Nixon, our top magician at the time, on TV. And I was absolutely enthralled. And my mother, because I wouldn't stop talking about what I saw on TV, she went and bought me, the classic kind of box of magic tricks, which is actually on this very shelf behind me. I've still got it from 1965, I think it was, or thereabouts. Amazing. And it's still pretty much intact, except for a couple of little tricks in there. But I never wanted to be a magician, would you believe? I really wasn't interested in doing magic as a living. I always wanted to be an actor. I was just absolutely. I was always played the fool at school. I was always the class clown, as is so called. And I think my mother was a frustrated actress. She always loved watching the Sunday matinees and going to the movies when she was a child, and was absolutely intrigued by the life of Elizabeth Taylor. So she kind of encouraged me in a small fashion. But I think probably after I got into the retail trade when I first left school, but still being a frustrated actor, I joined a part-time drama college up in London. It's called the City Literary Institute, affectionately known as the City Lit. And many years later, I ended up teaching there. So we'll talk about that later maybe. But yeah, that was my first inspiration of performance skills. And really, I learned my stagecraft. I learned how to project my voice. I'm always happiest on a stage. If you put me on a stage, I'm home. And away, I go. And then
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was mentioning to somebody the other day, could have been my wife or somebody, that's the only place where I feel at home too, is when I'm performing or on stage, if you will. And you shared with me just before we went to air a beautiful book, and I'd love you to, if you will, share that with our viewers and listeners.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted, because one of the other things I'm getting into is voice work. So that's audiobooks and voiceovers. It's something I've always kind of wanted to do. I moderate my voice a little bit when I'm doing that. But this book was actually given to me by a student by the name of Dennis Preston, if he's watching. And he was a student of mine when I was teaching magic at the City Lit. And this book is called Carter Beats the Devil by Glenn David Gould. And it is actually about a chap who became a magician, and it's a thriller. And the thriller incorporates lots and lots of famous names in the book, including Houdini. And if you're a magician, you never read it, it's a must read. It really is very, very good. and I've been using this as an example to do some of my voice work to use as a demo.
Excellent, excellent. So exciting. And I believe, I'm sure you'll agree with me as well, that history and knowing the history of magic is just as important as performing magic, as the theatrical aspect of magic. It's so enriching to know the rich history, if you will, of magic. And collecting books such as this, or having been given books by students, or having been signed, etc., that's so important. That increases the quality of our life as well. And I'm so glad you share that with us today, Paul. I want to talk. It always seems like we never have enough time, but we're going to make the time. I want to talk a little bit about the things you've done as far as magic is concerned, and I think it was the very first time I ever saw you, perhaps the second. I know you've done the gala shows quite a few times, but the president of the International Assembly of the Society of American Magicians, of which we're both members, Anthony Darkstone, has made you the envoy for England and has made me the envoy for Canada. There's all different assembly envoys all over the world. And he also put us on the same gala show, I believe it was last August of last year, aptly titled the Gotham City Marvels. I cheated. I glanced down at my notes for those who are wondering, why do I keep glancing away? I've got cheat notes here. And you portrayed a really, really neat character. I'd forgotten this because we've done quite a few galas and shows and many other things since, but upon researching you a little bit, I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a clip of you performing and thusly illustrate kind of where you're coming from and where you're at. So, and I understand too, that in the upcoming gala, and this is an unabashed plug for the upcoming gala. If you're watching this before June 2022, it's going to be, and I'm checking the date on this, June 11th, on wherever you're watching this, be it Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, even TikTok, all social media. The gala show will be honoring somebody very special. I'm not going to mention who it is because he's likely watching this as well. But you do a very nice toast to this person. And I thought, wow, that's class. That's really nice. And so I'm hoping our viewers and listeners out there will catch this gala in June. And Anthony Darkstone has also made me the associate producer of the show, of which I was honored to be a small part of anyway. So without further ado, I want to cut away a little bit and show this clip, and then we'll talk about the clip. So we'll do that now. wasn't that amazing? So let's chat a little bit about that clip. Now, Anthony mentioned The Wiz, and I believe that's probably the name of this character.
Yeah, indeed. It's a very strange story behind this, actually, because as I said, I wanted to start. I started out as an actor originally before I became a professional magician, and many years ago, I was involved in a production which was actually shown at the West End, London. I got involved in a theatre production up there with a singer called Sally Oldfield, the sister of oh crikey.
It's all good.
Mr. Oldfield, I'm just going to say,
Okay.
Tubular Bells fame, and she was the star of that particular show, and I developed this character as a result of a play that I did. It was a kind of a fringe play on the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it was a kind of a rewrite, and they wanted this kind of like Igor character, so that developed from there, and I stylized it so to make it, and I've used it for many years in things like corporate events and theme events, and it's gone down particularly well. I actually used it just at the beginning of the year at an event, at a charitable event. I think I scared the bejeebers out of a load of people, which was really funny. But yeah, that character developed, and I just wanted it to be a bit hip, and I just called it The Wiz, and it's a really funny kind of crazy nuts kind of character. Doesn't normally speak, so that's where it developed. And the makeup that I use on that, I was actually helped with the cast of Cats in the West End of London. I was doing a show where they were at, and I talked about this character, and they said, "Oh, you ought to use some of this makeup," and they helped me develop it.
Wow.
Really cool. Yeah.
I love the way you move. I love the way you move in that clip as well. Your whole posture changes into this character. You're no longer Paul Abbey, you're the Wiz, if you will. And I love the name as well, because it reminds me of that. It was on Broadway. It was probably all over the world back probably in the 60s or 70s, called The Wiz, based on The Wizard of Oz, etc. In any case, your whole posture becomes the Wiz, and you kind of not really shuffle out, but you come out there, and you're presenting a very standard magic effect for the lay people out there. The non-magicians may have just seen it for the first time, but your presentation adds so much, because you've put this whole character embodies, if you will, the effect, the props. And that's one of the things I love, because I'm looking at it as well from a staging perspective, my background, as well as, and not acting so much, but I have theatrical training, etc., as well. So I can appreciate the importance, and you bring that, if you will, to the stage. You brought that to the clip. And I just love that. You've taken already a relatively baffling effect, somewhat amusing when I do it. I appeal to children. I'm a children's entertainer primarily, and have done that. Are they the Cavari sticks, or is it a different make?
They are the Cavari sticks.
I recognize them. I have those as well. I use the Cavari sticks as well. I said to my wife as we were watching that, I think he's using the Cavari sticks. She's seen me do, my stage shows and platform shows a million times. So I had to share this, and I'm so glad you gave me permission. I had to share that clip, because it really does. It epitomizes for me what magic is. And I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that or what, but your training sure shows. And I wish that everybody new and old and just beginning in magic could really embody a character, because really, and I wrote a book about this called Developing Your Character, available on Amazon. Yes, I had to plug that shamelessly. Really, it's an extension of yourself, isn't it? Or can be. I like to encourage people, if they do bring out a stage character, it may be one of the facets of who they are. How do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what I learned at drama school is you have to kind of really dive into the depths of yourself to find these things. You know, there's sometimes I remember Sean Connery was on an interview on Parkinson. I can't repeat what he said on there because it was very adult content, but I remember him saying that sometimes you have to make yourself a fool of yourself, and what he meant by that is that you have to sometimes exaggerate and really draw out what is painfully, excruciatingly embarrassing normally. And then when you pull that out and then really sell it, really kind of wring the towel out, really wring the juices out of it, you suddenly kind of go, wow, I've created something just out of kind of goofing around. And that's how it develops. It took a long time. The thing is, I think I got that character from a really good director, because there was a lady director back then at the time, it's years ago, and she kept on kind of going, I wonder if you would just kind of like do that little bit and then do this. And it was those little tiny tweaks that kind of added to it. And then when it kind of developed and it came to the point of the play, everybody was in hysterics. They just kind of go, wow, that is so cool, you know, the way it's developed. And then all I had to do was kind of take the basic outfit and stylized it and then changed it a little bit. But that walk I do is kind of really hunched over. I really procured that walk. I kind of got that, and you know, you kind of draw the face and
Yes,
rubberise your face, which I love. I just love that.
absolutely. I love it so much as well, because also you just brought to our attention, I think it's very crucial, the importance of good direction. And if a person is lucky enough or blessed enough to have a director, or have that stage training and know about blocking and having them, the popular term now is tweaking that your show or your act. It's so important. It's not for everybody. A lot of people, it is for everybody, but a lot of people can't take direction or refuse to, or their ego gets in the way. But it's so worth it and so important. I speak to no end to a number of people that we respect. We have some mutual friends in common, and they go on and on as well about get a good director. You think you've got your show together? Show it to them. Show it to the, not so much the producer, but the director or the person that can help you bring out more emotion, more. For example, walking. I remember I had, this was a long time ago, early in my career. I was fortunate enough to have a director, and he helped tweak my movements on stage. It's pretty much who I am, that and Tai Chi as well, which we'll speak about a little bit later. But it was my wife at the time. He criticized her the most. He said, well, you're not walking like a woman. And she was just walking the way she normally would. But what he was looking for, in essence, was a little bit of an exaggeration, because we have to exaggerate a little bit our movements on stage, not only for the physical distance, but mainly for the physical distance, as opposed to if you're doing film, then the camera's right there, you've got close-ups. But your audience that witnesses a stage production doesn't have the luxury. It's a whole different medium. So you have to a little bit exaggerate your movements, but not in an odd sort of way. And that's why oftentimes a person who has a stage background, their movements won't translate well to television. It'll look a bit exaggerated. And sometimes a person who has a lot of television experience, it doesn't translate well to live performances, because essentially they're just working within a rectangle and keeping their movements within that. But I thought that was so important what you brought up, Paul, was direction. And how do you feel about that? Do you believe as well that really, if a person can afford acting lessons, staging, direction, should they get that, or should they focus just on the magic techniques at first? What do you
No,
think?
no, absolutely, without question. Any of my students, I say to them, you know, if you want to develop this, go and do some acting classes as well. The thing is that in my particular course, I really endorse the voice work, the script work, and stagecraft, because exactly what you've just talked about, when you're on stage, you have to sort of exaggerate it a little bit, but without being pantomime, because pantomime is completely over the top. And we have to kind of find, as you know, in Tai Chi, that middle ground. So that middle ground is quite specific, because again, in film and TV, well, film in particular, I remember another interview by a famous star who was talking about George Clooney, and I can't remember who he was working with at the time. And then his friend said, "We're going to be quiet now. They're filming." He said, "But they're not doing anything." And he said, "Bingo, that's exactly it." And you know, the movements and the expressions were so tiny, and the stage set was so silent. He actually didn't think they were doing anything. They thought they were just waiting for the camera to wind up or the lights to come on or something. So indeed, having to learn stagecraft is vitally important. Some of the best students that I've had have already done acting or had stagecraft. I've got a couple of students of mine who've actually gone out to the big wide world and professionals now. One of them is in the SAM. I won't embarrass her with the name, but a lady who's one of our SAM members. She's very, very good, and she started as an actor, and it was easy to teach her, to be frank. I find that people have had some acting training or actors in some way, just instinctive, and that makes a huge difference. It really does. And by the way, one of the things that had to be beaten out of me is my voice, because when I was at stage school, I came from South London originally. So my teacher used to say, "You've got to get rid of that insidious little South London accent," because I used to really talk like this, I used to be like that, you know what I mean? And it was awful. So this is a kind of like, again, a middle ground. And when I'm acting, or whether I'm doing stage stuff, and then I turn the RP up a little bit.
Yes, so crucial. We call it projection. I don't know if it's the same term in UK or not, or in England rather, but I never worry, just between you and me, when I've gone out to do shows in a row, I'd always keep a sound system in the trunk of my car anyway, just in case the venue turns out to be huger than they described. But I've never worried about not having a mic, a lapel mic or a regular mic, because I was trained to project from, I guess, the diaphragm. Can't see this on camera, but and it becomes booming, it becomes encompassing. It's sort of like when you're in the theater now to see a movie, and they've got all this special sound, and it's very booming, and you feel it, you feel the bass, etc. Well, I've always attempted to do that, so I've never panicked when I've shown up at a venue and set up, and they said, "Well, no, you didn't ask for a mic. We don't have a mic." And it's like, no problem. Now, if we're talking 10,000 or more people, and depending if it's outdoors, it's trickier to project one's voice. I find anyway, in outdoor settings, easier in indoor settings, but so crucial. Voice work, enunciating. You don't want to mumble, as you were suggesting. Because you're giving a show, you're presenting, you want to give, you want to share with your audiences, and pauses and all this, so crucial. I believe, and I hope you agree, makes for a better magician slash performer.
Without question. I've got to say, one of the most powerful voices I've ever heard on any stage was Charlton Heston. I had the privilege of actually seeing him and meeting him afterwards at the Ashcroft Theatre in Croydon, which is South London in England here. And that was many, many years ago. And my God, he was playing A Man for All Seasons, and he came out on the stage. And there was no, the theatre there was a medium-sized theatre, and there was no electronic acoustics or aids there. They were just using their natural voices. My God, I reeled back with the power of his voice. It was incredible, absolutely amazing. Very rarely do you hear voices like that, except for maybe Brian Blessed.
Very inspiring, very inspiring. Whenever I see a good performance by whoever it happens to be at the time, whether it's an acting performance or magic or any sort of performance art, it inspires me to be better than my best. I was discussing this with someone the other night. I think it might have been my wife. And I was saying to her, I always strive. This is because of my upbringing. I had a very disciplined upbringing as well, and I'm very grateful for that. It made me want to strive to always be first in my class at school. And, oh, I got in the 90s out of 100. I was ready to call it all quits, if you will. So I always had to do at least 100%, but I learned through a job totally unrelated to magic. They demanded of me, because I scored 100 on this particular exam, and they said, not good enough, you have to be better than that. I thought, what? Wow. So that got me working and thinking and studying again and retaking. I don't know if it was the same exam or a different exam they gave me. And I achieved that. They marked me as 105 or 110. And I knew that feeling of satisfaction. Yes, you can do better than what you think is your best. You think you're doing your best, strive for more. And that might sound a little bit hard to take, but now I strive for that. It's it's what I hope to do. I was excited that you mentioned, one of us or maybe both of us mentioned Tai Chi. As a supporter, I'll always promote Tai Chi, Qigong, which actually predated, as far as I know, Tai Chi, and Gong Fu or Kung Fu. It's all meditation. It's moving meditation, but I was introduced to meditation solely a long time ago in 1989 by a Mahatma. Mahatma gave me these techniques, and I don't know where I'd be without meditation. I could never have done 4 shows in a row, traveling across the city in the central part of Canada all weekend, 4 shows on the Sunday, 20 shows or more at Christmas time. If not for pacing myself on a very superficial level, meditation helped me to pace myself. So I'd sit in the car, drive myself to the event, sit and meditate, go in, set up, do the show, tear down, bring it back to my car, sit and meditate, drive off to the gig. So crucial for so many reasons. If people out there are not into spirituality, we won't speak in those terms, but I will speak in terms of meditation as a way of sort of pacing yourself and regaining your energy, your inner energy, if you will, be it chi or ki or prana, and then sharing that energy again with others. What's really important to me, and I outlined this in one of my books, which combined performance art with metaphysics, is Tai Chi. And even if a person studies and practices yoga, that's fine, or Tai Chi, or Qigong. Qigong, I believe, is a whole health system in itself. It's very, very ancient for those who are not familiar with it. And really, I believe I attribute my performing to that. I attribute my, I don't want to call it success, but my apparent ease, my movements, to having done Tai Chi and Qigong for many years, for more than 20 years, probably 30 years or more. And so I know that you're a Sifu, you're a teacher of Tai Chi, and I'd love for you, if you will, to share with all of us out there the importance. Don't just be a magician. It's enough to be a magician. That's fine. But if you can get acting lessons, performing techniques, but even more, because this will help you mind, body, and soul, mind, body, and spirit, if you will, Tai Chi or yoga. How do we tie that in with performing and with magic?
Oh, well, that's very interesting because I didn't go into the military, I wanted to develop myself in some form of self-discipline. So when I was at school, I was bullied a lot and I got beaten up and I got into a lot of fights. And it was only when I started studying judo at school, it built up my confidence a little bit. And then from there, over the years, got into karates and kung fu's and tai jiu-jitsu and loads of other different things. And one of the things that was pointed out when I was at stage school was, you move well. And I didn't really attribute it to anything, except I realized it must have been obviously to do with the martial arts, because there's a lot of balance involved in it. I mean, a really silly example of this is if you look at a lot of actors, and I've seen this, and there's a book written by a guy called David Mamet, who's a famous director, and he's always pointing out the floppy arms and the floppy hands, and actors do this because they don't know what to do with their hands and their arms. And if you look at somebody like William Shatner, who happens to be Canadian, by the way, he always kind of like had a stance. He was either stood side on, and he never had a problem with what to do with his hands or his arms. And that was something I must have picked up. But because we learn in martial arts economy of movement, we only move when we need to, that kind of developed as well. I actually found a lot of power by sticking my hands in my pockets, because people felt that they needed to do this all the time with their hands and being Italianate. But in actual fact, you don't need to do anything. You know, that classic less is more thing.
Yes.
So I realized that my balance and my movement, the way I walked across a stage, because there's another thing I noticed with other actors, they would come on. Oh, and by the way, there's a lot of method acting going on out there, I know, and I actually was pleased to know to learn the Stanislavski method. So Stanislavski method means that you are actually acting before you come onto the stage. So you're walking up maybe the stairs and the flies and the wings, and you're kind of going, right, I've parked my car, where did I put my keys? And oh, here's the door, and I'll walk in. Whereas a lot of actors, they just walk in, then they start. But I've always used that technique, and that's really helped me. And it also helps me on my movement, my general stagecraft. And if you look at some actors, particularly novices, they almost dash to the center of the stage or dash to their mark, and they almost stop like an arrow. Yes. And it's really weird, and it looks uncomfortable. Whereas what I used to do, again, with the martial arts, with your steps and with your strikes, you know that you're making up a distance when you're throwing a punch or when you're doing a kick. I knew that was exactly 2 paces away. So I would go, I have to take 1, 2, third pace, and I'm there. So the pace in the middle is the fast one, and the 2 on either side is speed it up, fast one, slow it down, so I come to a gentle halt, and it doesn't look so uncomfortable.
Yes, excellent. That's so important. It's so important for folks out there. We can relate to that as well, but it's important to convey this. You very, very kindly offered before we went to air to share some magic, and I never force, I never encourage my guests to, I never pressure them is what I should say, to do any bits of magic. But if you're prepared, if you're ready, that would be so amazing. I don't know if you feel comfortable to share a magic illusion with us.
Sure, I'd love to. And I tell you what, the reason why, when we talked initially, just a general chat before we decided to do this, I thought, I wonder if there's something I could do which conveys how we do our magic and how we do the storytelling as an actor. Now, this is actually true. I don't do many card tricks. I really don't. I do a lot of more whimsical stuff with coins and what I call natural magic stuff around. So there's very, very few card tricks I do, but this one I absolutely love. And it was actually it was devised by a very, very good friend of mine. And anybody who's a magician will know this. But I would love to tell this as a story, as I do when I perform.
Excellent. Let's do it.
So, I'll do it as if I've just come onto the stage to do my little show. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't do many card tricks, but I'd love to share this one with you. And it's because that sometimes I'm asked to do speeches and talks for people. And I went to a college and a school, and I did this little bit of magic. And at the end of it, the younger ones in the college and the school all got together with the teacher, the performance teacher, and they made me a pack of cards, which is really, really cool. Now, hopefully that reads correctly. And it actually says, to To the magician, thank you for the show. I think they spelled the word magician wrong, but it doesn't matter. Now, I'll show you these. I was absolutely delighted and honoured to have these, and I've kept them all these years as a very, very special thing. But the only reason why I show people it is because of the story behind it. It's really quite bizarre and fun. Now, with a normal pack of cards, all the cards should have a bit of uniformity to the shapes and the faces. But as you can see from these, they're a little bit abstract. That one's upside down there, but you can see it's supposed to look like a figure with a diamond and something, yes, whatever. And that one's a little bit more obvious as to what it is and what else we got there. Not sure, you have to kind of decipher that one. Bit more standard. What else we got? Yeah, we know what that one is. And some of these are a little bit abstract, as you can see from this one. Now, couldn't quite work out what was going on there. So the teacher and I went up to the little boy who drew it and I said, what's that all about? And they said, I'll just come back on holiday from holiday, and that's what we saw from the beach. And I went, oh, right, you do realise it's supposed to be a playing card, don't you? So grab his pen and you just put nine of spades in there very quickly. So that was fun. So you get the general idea. They've got all these different designs. Now, with a pack of cards, as we all know, the backs are usually the same. But as you can see from these, they're a little bit different. And that's okay as well, because this is supposed to be a bit of fun, isn't it? So we don't mind. Now, can you imagine? I go off to do a very posh job, got my black tie on, got my DJ, turn up at this this corporate event, and I reached into my pocket and I pulled out the wrong cards, and I've gone, oh my God, I forgot to change them over the night before. What am I going to do now? So I had to use a technique based on what they call NLP, which is a very modern science now, based on the ancients. And I thought, well, I might be able to get away with this if I can make people believe that these are real cards. So at a group of table, usually sitting at a table of 10, I picked on one person and I said to them, right, what I want you to do is remember a card. But if you're going to remember this, I want you to remember it as a proper card. So I just want you to think about what you're doing. And after a while, as I was snapping my fingers, they wondered what was going on. And they actually started to think they believed they saw a real card. Now, this was good. I thought, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? They told me, and I went, it's working, it's working, it's great. Wasn't too sure what was going on with the rest of the audience around the table. So I thought, okay, if I stick that on the front there, everybody will think that they're just seeing a real card and maybe a real pack. Now, obviously, I could do that with the one card, but I couldn't do that with the others. That wasn't going to work unless I could do something with the back. So if I did that again, what I did was I did a thing called power of suggestion. I put a suggestive word into everybody's mind and went around everybody. And after a while, they started believing they were seeing a real back as well. So I thought, real back at the back, they think they're seeing that. Real card at the front, they think they're seeing that. But obviously not the ones in the middle. Unless I can do a group hypnosis thing, unless I can make them really, really believe that they were seeing a real pack of cards. Now, that's impossible. But I carried on and I managed to get through the evening doing it. Now, can you imagine at the end of the evening, I thought to myself, oh dear, even I'm starting to believe this now. Now, I wonder what effect that's going to have if I go back to that school and I say to them, look, listen, kids, you know that pack of cards you made for me? I've kind of ruined them. And I thought, I'm going to have to sort this out. So do you know what I did? I actually took the cards one at a time and I sat up till 4 o'clock in the morning, unhypnotizing them. Yes, indeed. I had to go through every single card one at a time and I had to unhypnotize the cards. I had to do that to myself in order to make everybody else believe that they were actually seeing these kids' cards. And it's true, as I'm riding this bike, I said that I would never do that again. And you know what? I never have.
I love that. I love that, Paul.
It's great fun. I absolutely love that. Yeah.
Oh.
I've got a lot of fun with that. That's the shortened version. There's a longer version to that, by the way, but time constraints, I've just kept it a bit short.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. I love that. It's entertaining. It's baffling. It's all that one would hope for in a well-crafted magic illusion, if you will. Thank you so much for sharing that one with us. That's
Oh, my pleasure.
appreciated.
We enjoyed it.
As we begin to wrap up, I want to again call to people's attention June 11th. And it's going to be actually an hour earlier on the Pacific coast of Canada. So on the Pacific coast of the US and Canada, it'll be noon, and 3 hours later in the East, and 7 hours later in the UK. So what turns out to be 12 noon in North America turns out to be about 7 p.m., I believe, in UK. The gala show. And Anthony Darkstone, the president of our International Assembly of the Society of American Magicians, has worked so hard on this. I know because I've assisted him to some degree as associate producer, and I was privy to see you, Paul, do your toast. So if people want to see Paul's very brief toast to someone, and it will be revealed who it is if you watch that show on June 11th. Also, you can also look at archives and actually, I'm trying to remember where on some of the Facebook pages they can go back and see some of the gala shows you've been in. In particular, they saw a clip this time round of the August 2021 one. But wherever you can, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is study Paul Abbey's attitude, his movements. It's so important in the world of magic, where sometimes things can get lost. Sometimes all that's important, and I see that happening, and I want to shift that consciousness, if you will, to just, a video of someone going, boom, it's gone, to storytelling, much like what you did. It has a rhyme and reason, a middle, a beginning, an end to it. It makes sense as far as structure and everything, and timing and all of that. So I want everyone out there, if they can, to study you, to see how you move and how you speak, and not to copy you, but to be inspired, and maybe get some sort of teacher or teachers to tutor them and maybe get direction as well. Let's say folks want to contact you, Paul. Is there any way they can?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Either via Facebook or my email address, which is Paul Abbey, all one word, .thewiz, THEWIZ, at virgin.net. So everybody knows me as my nickname, Wiz or the Wiz. So all my magical colleagues know me as that. So easy to remember.
Excellent.
Can I just add this? Something very funny about that, about my toast. My kind of like my little signature thing now is with a martini glass. And there was it's a very funny thing, because when I go out and I do my Facebook posts, I'm always talking about I've gone to a restaurant or a cafe and I've got my pint of vodka. And so the martini glass is supposed to be my vodka martini. And the real joke about this, I'm actually teetotal. So I do have the occasional drink and that, but I did buy a bottle of martini once, and it lasted nearly 2 years.
I love that. I love that.
Water.
Once again, I want to thank you, Paul Abbey, for joining us this day. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a great honor. Thank you so much for asking me. I really enjoy this sort of thing.
And I as well, a great honor having you on. And I want to thank my audience out there, especially for tuning in this day. And we'll see you all again really soon.